Hello, my name is Cesare Cisneros, and this is my presentation on organophosphate pesticides. Organophosphate pesticides are the most common and most toxic insecticide that is used today in agriculture. It's classified by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency as being highly or even moderately toxic. It's similar to a chemical warfare agent that was produced and used during World War II. Organophosphate pesticides, or OP pesticides, affect the nervous system by inhibiting an enzyme that is called acetylcholinesterase, which can be found in the synapses between the nerve cell and the muscle cell. When it is broken down after stimulation, it breaks into the acetic acid and the choline, and when it's inhibited, the acetylcholine will accumulate in the synapse, and this is going to cause muscle paralysis. This is a table of the OP pesticides that are registered by the Environmental Protection Agency, including some of those that are also restricted. It's kind of hard to see, sorry. Exposure. People can be exposed to the pesticide through multiple variations. They can be exposed through the air, through food, which is the most common, dust, soil, and sometimes they can even be exposed through their pets. It is commonly used in agriculture, so it can be found in fruits and vegetables, things like peaches, apples, grapes, green beans, and even pears. People who work in the agriculture field, pregnant women and children are at high risk of exposure and susceptibility. But the most at risk are going to be young children because they are still developing, and children from farmers or farming families, as well as those in the agricultural areas, are among the most that are exposed to the organophosphate pesticides. And symptoms when people have been exposed can be things such as nausea, headache, twitching, trembling, tearing, even excessive salivation. It can also be inability to breathe, things such as asthma, convulsions, and if exposed at a really high dose, it can cause death. After being exposed to a low dose of the OP pesticides for an extended period of time, some may experience developmental effects, reproductive effects, or even cancerous effects. For developmental effects, a recent study did show that children who are exposed to the organophosphate pesticides are likely to be diagnosed with ADHD, as well as having the organophosphate pesticides metabolites present in the body is seen to be connected with lower levels of testosterone and other sex hormones, so this may affect male fertility. And even though most are not categorized as being carcinogens, the CDC did show several studies that have linked the exposure of the pesticide to leukemia and lymphoma. For another research done for early exposure to organophosphate pesticides in the pediatric respiratory symptoms, it was done in the Chamacos cohort study, which is for the study for the health assessment of mothers and children of Salinas. It in 2000 took about 359 pregnant women and tested them over a period of time, and then their children as well. And it investigated the relationship between early life exposure and the organophosphate pesticides and the respiratory outcomes. The metabolites of the organophosphate pesticides were measured in the urine of the mothers twice during their pregnancy, the first time at about 13 weeks and then the following at about 16 weeks, and then 5 times in their children from the age of about 6 months to 5 years old. They did find connections between the dialkyl phosphate, the prenatal dialkyl phosphate, concentrations, especially the diethyl and then the dimethyl. So the DE and the DM concentrations were associated with respiratory symptoms and exercise-induced coughing. So the study in conclusion found that early life exposure to organophosphate pesticides were associated with respiratory symptoms that were consistent with possible asthma in children. In the prevention of the topic of prevention, the best way we did to limit the exposure that one has to the pesticide, they can do it by using less toxic alternatives, or pesticides, fruit that have that. Also to wash the product thoroughly, the produce thoroughly under cold water, and not just simply rinsing it, but actually rubbing it with your fingers or a brush to actually clean off the residue. Or even to eat a variety of fruits and vegetables. That way you can limit yourself to consuming one type of fruit and vegetable that may have high doses of it that you aren't able to clean off, or even to throw out the outer layers of the leafy vegetables. And a couple places were referenced in here: the Pesticide Action Network, the PAN North America, as well as the Early Life Exposure to the Organophosphate Pesticides article. Thank you.